Hello, so this is a video to explain in the framework of the Alter Eco Plus project. There have been recommendations on managing tourism carrying capacity and climate change resilience. These are mainstream plans that have been developed during May 2022. So this document on recommendations addresses a set of concepts, as I said, is part of Alter Eco Plus project. So basically, it gives an introduction to Alter Eco Plus project, but I'm going to be concentrating on the general recommendations. So it addresses recommendations concerning tourism carrying capacity, but it also addresses climate change recommendations, since sustainability is obviously critical, but we need to work on climate change and the resilience of our destinations. So the document, as I said, gives a first presentation on Alter Eco Plus, but I'm going to go directly to the carrying capacity and climate change recommendations. So in terms of tourism carrying capacity, it addresses three different recommendations. First, geographical and time spread of tourism, because in many destinations, usually that's what happens. It's not just that we have seasonality, but we are having tourism specifically in very specific hot spots of our destination, and perhaps we even have other parts of our destination that wish they had some flows of visitors. Also, the eco tax as an experience that different destinations have implemented to support the process of having funds to address different challenges in terms of carrying capacity, and also the logic of how we have to communicate tourism differently when we are addressing carrying capacity challenges. So there in the document, there are different recommendations for each of these topics. And in this case, when we talk about geographical and time spread of tourism, what we are addressing in this document that we certainly invite you to read is experiences from different research centers or destinations that they have in their objective. So increase the demand outside peak season, moving or the redistribution of the demand. And for instance, in this case that you are looking in the screen is the differential pricing, for instance, so that it helps increase the amount of out of the peak season, diversified attractions, experiences that can be conducted, immersive experiences, obviously, that have to be conducted beyond the peak season, market diversification. Okay, it connects very much with the third area that we're going to be covering in terms of tourism carrying capacity, that is the communication differently, in the logic that probably the markets that are traveling off season are different than the markets that are traveling peak season, in the logic of niche markets that they might live in the same country of residence, but the way they travel, with whom they travel, for which main purpose they are traveling is actually different. And that's something that market research can help with. And there are different examples in that logic. So there's also the case study also of England with three different tourism attractions: the Adrian's Wall, the Oakhampton Castle, and Osborne House, in the logic of how they have been spreading. So having policies that help them spread visitors and confront the carrying capacity issues that they were suffering in these destinations. In other example that is included here is the Cabo de Gata in Almeria in Spain. So what there is parking lots for very specific time frames. So access is closed in certain periods, like for instance from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. because there were high peaks. So the idea is that you motivate people to go early in the morning and then circulate to leave room for the rest that want to come later on. So this is a collaboration between the Natural Park, the Transport Consortium of the metropolitan area. So it means collaboration by different entities, and it's implemented in the peak season between July and September. Also, another example from England in terms of control of traffic, conservation of the old buildings, dispersal through product development, so that there are different activities that you can do beyond the hotspots, price policy, and involving the community. So, the residents that are part of course, the target audience that you want to benefit, that they see that they are part of the process. So there are plenty more examples, okay, in the document. But I think that what is clear about these recommendations and the examples that we provide is that we have to move forward in terms of acting so that we can create reasons for visitors to come off season, to do paying activities that are beyond the usual ones that are done in peak season. And we have to be brave to set limits, as we were seeing on the parking lots or diverting traffic or so. Eco-tax is another method or approach, if you want, to address carrying capacity, in the logic that in some countries are taxes, in some other countries are not. So they might be called, so there's a fee that has to be paid, but this is not the logic of a tax. But something that has to be clear is that if you're asking the visitor, so in some cases the examples are tourists, in some others the example are to both tourists and excursionists, whichever the target audience is, if they ask to whoever is asking them, is claiming them their fee, that person that works in that given hotel or tour operator or guide, or depending the method that you use to implement this fee or these tax, they need to be able to respond to what is the money for, okay? So it's not only that at the top, so the public administration, probably jointly with the Association of Tourism Businesses, have decided that it's very critical to implement this so that we also a commitment to sustainability, not only from the supply side and administration, but also from the demand side, and it's fine. But when a client, a visitor, is asking, so what is this money for? We have to have all the pyramid of people working in the tourism sector being trained to be brave and proud about saying what that money is being used for, okay? And it certainly needs to connect to improving the life of residents, improving services for tourism or for residents or traffic or whichever it is, but it has to be clear and different projects can be named so that the tourist actually feels great because it's contributing to this happening in the destination. So there are the case studies of Balearic Islands, of the city of Venice as well. So there are different cases that we bring in the document. Then communicating tourism differently is that we always tend to communicate tourism in a way that creates problems from current capacity perspective. And the logic of more, can, you're welcome. And that's fine, but we should be refining that. Everyone is welcome, that's for sure. There's no doubt there. And we are all destinations. Everyone that works in the tourism sector is a people person. So certainly the communication has to still be, you're welcome to come to explore. We are proud that you wanted our destination to be your place for your holidays or your study visit or whichever motivation got you to us. And that's for sure. But so we are honored to have you. But we live here. We work here. Please respect that, okay? So this other message has to be there, either because you have a tourism ethics code of conduct, or in the end you're telling them, take care of our homeland as if it were yours. Because in the end, if residents are happy living there, visitors are going to be much more happy when they experience it. Okay, so that's the logic behind the communicating tourism differently. And there are some examples, for instance, of the New Zealand campaign that probably you've seen, traveling under the social influence, that is very good. It's kind of, a bit being ironic about how visitors, sometimes we go for the more kind of Instagram kind of picture rather than really enjoying different experiences. Also the case in the Spanish of Navarre, that other tourism is possible, or the campaign Make Travel Matter from the UK. And then from the climate change resilience perspective, there are different topics that we address in these recommendations. So monitoring and reporting CO2 emissions, decarbonization of tourism operations, addressing plastic pollution, better use of land and sea, also caring about biodiversity and other examples of regulations. Okay, so these are pretty critical topics. And we again give examples as is happened in the carrying capacity example. So in monitoring and reporting CO2 emissions, we certainly bring the case of Valencia, for instance, and the logic of the transport footprint of travelers that is measured, indirect GHG emissions from energy consumption in tourism activities, and other indirect emissions that are measured in terms of accommodation, tourist consumption, waste management, and so on and so forth. And how from that measurement, so different actions are taken. In terms of decarbonization, also, we bring the example of Scotland with a net zero pathway for Scotland and the different steps that they have conducted. Also, the study of Victoria Hotel in Freiburg in Germany, that I think it's important that we not only bring cases from destinations, but also from the private sector, so that you can see that the initiatives are not only just from the public sector, there are many and plenty from the private sector as well. Addressing plastic pollution, this is pretty critical. Of course, there are many countries, and in Europe, you know that there's this elimination of the one-use disposable plastics, but then there's plenty more that can be done in terms of recover, recycle, encourage the use of alternative materials, teach the visitor about the dangers of plastic waste also. And so this is, for instance, the case of the Global Tourism Initiative in terms of different steps of One Planet. So eliminate problematic or unnecessary plastic packaging, take action to move from single-use to reuse models. So different actions that can be taken in your destination to move in this direction of reduction of plastic. Better use of land and sea, because we have to be taking care of our soil, but our basins also, so the underwater also, nature, and so, you know, soil erosion is one of the big problems that we are having, the degradation of the land, and we have to restore part of the work that is done there. So there are different examples. In this case, for instance, I'm showing you Vancouver. Then there are other examples like a private company, Iberostar Group, and the help that they are providing in this sense, because they are operating in mostly coastal areas. Other examples from Indonesia, from Tasmania. And then in terms of caring about diversity, it sounds like super obvious, no? Caring about biodiversity. But there's plenty of actions that can be taken. And this is an example from Italy, in the logic of the ecological beach. Okay, so in the logic of different actions that can be taken, so that we really demonstrate that so we benefit from our land, our biology, so different species, and they're amazing, they're attracting visitors to come to us and enjoy and visit, but we have to take care of them. And that's kind of the logic of this. And then other examples of regulations that have been happening, like the case of the Balearic Islands, for instance, with different policies on different topics like social economic sustainability, circularity, administrative simplification, also of different processes, thanks to measuring. And then the last part is about references. So we hope that this document that, as we were saying, addresses recommendations on managing carrying capacity and climate change are of your help in order to improve in terms of tourism carrying capacity or resilience on climate change. Thank you very much for listening.